All right, it actually has been a dream of mine to follow Dr. Seifried. I just need to say thank you for the work you do. I think God has, I remember reading your information sitting in a dark hallway in a hospital in Mitchell, South Dakota, when I was desperate to figure out how do I implement this in my mom. And I think God gives us gifts. His gift is to stay present in the sea of people telling him no. And then has the strength and the support and the brain power to be able to research the things that I need to be able to do what God gifted me with, which is to translate what he just said. Because his information is amazing. And when I look at what I've done with his information, and I have helped, if you know me in this room, it was through these lessons that I sat there saying, how do I get my mom to understand this? Because she is sick. She may have been the county auditor for the last 15 years, and she may have sewn all of my clothes until the age of 12, but she can't do a GKI. She will prick her finger. She'll do what I tell her to, but she can't do math right now, and she really couldn't even read. So this lecture that I'm going to give you is answering a question that I think I get a lot of questions trying to translate. How do you do this? For all of the ways we try to answer people's questions, whether it's on social media or through an email, one of the most common ones is, my loved one has cancer, can you take care of her? And I did try that, but it was very dangerous to take care of them across the country in a process that really didn't allow for the nuances to be done day to day when you live 2 plane rides away. So in the process of me teaching, how do you take a metabolic disorder? How do you take broken mitochondria and make them healthy? Well, I haven't used cancer for a death rate in a long time, but we know that high insulin, which is part of this process, is a death. It does correlate to the causes of illnesses that bring you into my clinic. And all of those in red are correlated to a high insulin level, to broken mitochondria. And when we look at how do we measure them, we're going to start with some pretty easy measurements, like what's your body mass index? What's your height to waist ratio? And we could get you to do those across the country. We could even push you to do a couple of labs. Even if your doctor wouldn't do them, we could get a hemoglobin A1C done, but we're missing it. You're going to hear of people who have pretty good hemoglobin A1Cs, yet they still got cancer. And so when you say, well, oops, I pushed the backwards button, sorry there. When you look at hemoglobin A1C, I'm going to remind you that this is a process of sugar floating around your blood, and it gets stuck to things. It glycates. That's called a glycated hemoglobin A1C, and it's an average of your blood sugar because the thing it's glycating, the thing it's sticking to, is a protein called globin. Those globins hide out in this cell, which does not have mitochondria, it does not have a nucleus, but it delivers oxygen to your body. These strings of globin, you have 4 of them that wind together, then get added to the cups of heme, and then we drip iron into them, and these are the seats that oxygen will ride to your destination of your body. That's how you oxygenate your body. And this is understandable to my mom. When you have high blood sugar, it will splat like gum to the bottom of your shoe. It will stick to that pocket until the death of this cell. Well, these cells on average last about 100 days in your body, and I spent a whole year across the stages where people asked me to speak explaining that glycated hemoglobin A1C is a really important measurement, because as I tried to figure out how broken is your mitochondria, it was that blood sugar that really was my first tipping point, and something you could check, you could understand. So when I look at this red blood cell, and we open it up, we look behind the skin of that red blood cell, we fill all those oxygen into their parking spots, and now we splat I think this one's actually 6 sugars out of 100. It's a 6% hemoglobin A1C. And the math, as long as you have those red blood cells that last 126 days, or 120 days, you will have an average blood sugar of 126. And if we can get you down to only splatting 5 out of 100, now your average blood sugar is 97. Okay, so this gives me some information on what the blood sugar is doing, but they still get cancer. And when they come in with an A1C of 10, and we say, okay, let's get that number down, we are taking the average blood sugar lower and lower and lower and lower. And in the background, there are a whole bunch of other things that are happening. The mitochondria isn't working as well. When they get into the 6s, we start to take diagnoses off of their problem list, but they're still growing these other problems that they had long before they met me. And when I look at somebody who's never had insulin resistance, they've never had pathology, their average blood sugar is 73. I'm not saying go get a hemoglobin A1C of 4.2. There's actually problems with that. But I'm showing you that normal is so far removed from what we see in the clinic today that you're going to have a tough time extrapolating. All right, doc, I've come to you. I've lost 100 pounds. I've lost 70 pounds. I've heard those stories today. I'm stalled. Do I still have insulin resistance? Am I still making broken mitochondria, or am I making healthy ones? And the answer to that, when I first started, was, well, let's look at fasting blood sugar. That'll help me help them and me say, is it real? Fasting blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C had problems. If I got to have the fastest way to say, do you have insulin resistance? Do you have insulin resistance? I would want to go into your liver and biopsy the liver, not wait for it to be fatty liver when all the enzymes are abnormal, but I want to know, what are the mitochondria in your liver using? Because that is where the energy is coming from. And if it's a fatty liver, if you're storing more fat in the liver than you're using, well, then I think you're making broken mitochondria still. You haven't reversed the insulin resistance. And as we look at that clinically, it's a process that took a long time to make the problem. Here is a beautiful, perfect liver. But when we start to bathe it in excess insulin, well, first of all, we store a bunch of sugar. Okay, fill that liver up with sugar. In an instant, if you need that sugar, it's available. It's ready to be burned in any of the mitochondria of your body. But if it got full, we made it into some glycogen. We stored it in a bunch of strings, and now it's more efficiently stored in that liver, and now you have glycogen. But it's reversible. I can quickly turn that glycogen back into sugar, and now you can burn it in any place you want. From this point forward in the story, your body starts to package energy into fat. And once it's in a string of fat, it can't go back to sugar. There is no exit out of the body that goes fat to sugar. It goes fat to burning a fatty acid or burning a ketone. So we learned that if you leave that fat in that cell for a long time, in that liver for a long time, it changes the way it looks. Now, this is far down the path that there's a problem. We've got fatty liver, we've got cirrhosis. I have, pathologists who can biopsy and tell me the problem. I'm not waiting for that problem to tell you still have insulin resistance. I want to know what that mitochondria in your liver is burning and what it prefers to burn. All right, so if we're going to ever fix fatty livers, we have an exit of, yes, you must first get rid of the glucose out of your liver. Then you must empty the glycogen out of the liver before you can finally start to get some of the fat that you store in the liver. And with that, we're going to take a little bit of how do you measure insulin resistance and how do you know if it's gone. So these research folks, much like Dr. Seafried, have shown us when you have pathology building, we know that glucose along the left-hand side there, and we have insulin along the other side. I bet you I'd put that at the end of the slide. Pretend insulin is set on the other side right there. Oh, here it is. I'm like, I filled order wrong. So this is one person's pathology where the glucose shoots way too high, and the insulin, which is in the dotted line next to it, is in that profile of person that they made way too much insulin along the way. The glucose shot up in this person, and they made that kind of insulin. These different patterns of insulin production churn out in my clinic, and they do not get stamped across your forehead, and we have to figure it out. How much insulin are you taking to manage that glucose? I don't know. So we can try to measure the insulin, but it's terrible. You shouldn't ask me to mention, the reason you want to know this, though, is, again, the research has been very clear. If you want to make diabetes, make a bunch of insulin. If you want to make cardiovascular disease, make a bunch of insulin. If you want to make cancer, make a bunch of insulin. All-cause mortality, again, related to the amount of insulin that's been produced in those patients over time. It's why it predicts those death rates in that pie chart from the first of the lecture. As you look at an insulin clamp, that is actually where we can say, how much insulin does it take in you to manage your sugar? Insulin clamps only happen in research. We cannot do them in my clinic. But that's where the real answer is. This is a difficult thing to answer in humans because you adjust. You will adapt as soon as we start testing you. Only when we can clamp, we have insulin pipetted in to keep the sugar at a stable level, and then we watch to see what you do in response to an elevated glucose. And we can't do that in my clinic. We can't do that in real time. So these studies looked at 75 grams of glucose is what they would use, and you've probably all seen this. Yes, we could do a Kraft test. We could do a insulin tolerance test, but that's probably only going to get done without an argument if you're pregnant. When you're trying to do this just to see what your health is, it's a fight. But we can have you take a meal, and in my clinic, that's what we study. What are you eating? What is it doing? And we're going to try and predict, based on what the research team has told me, what the glucose does. This is what normal looks like according to those researchers. And by the time 90 minutes is up, their glucose went from a fasting glucose around that 90, 85, 90 mark. By 90 minutes after the meal, it's down to just about 110. And we're getting close to baseline at 2 hours. The insulin that it takes to do that, I still think this is excessive, based on what I see in my clinic. All right, you can't do that though, so let's go to what I teach patients to do, which is, I'm gonna do one more thing. In our practice, and in anybody that's a physician here or a practitioner, we know that we were taught impaired glucose tolerance tests are gonna start with those who are just about to have diabetes. They show up impaired glucose tolerance. I'm sorry, I just said that wrong. Impaired glucose tolerance was going to be the first thing in the stages of pathology that you show up with. But your doctor is checking glucose, and I'm going to tell you that this is normal all day long. Checking the insulin, nobody's doing that. So we're just looking at the glucose, trying to make decisions when we only have half of the information. That insulin went way too high. That's what disease looks like. So if that didn't get treated, we were taught that it would advance to impaired fasting glucose. Well, now I can diagnose you. Now your fasting glucose is high enough that I can see that there's a problem. It goes way too high. It does not come. It comes back towards baseline, which I always thought was a little weird because that's not what the last people did. And it turns out these people are not the same people. The profile of how you pathologically make insulin is in a different subset, a different cohort. And again, nobody tells you that as the physician or the patient when you walk through the room. Most people in today's world start with insulin resistance in their teenage years. They have a combined problem of insulin, impaired glucose tolerance with impaired fasting glucose. And even when the physicians catch it, the first thing they throw at you are the ways to make more insulin or maybe metformin, but they're making a ton of insulin, and these are the folks of the next generation, of our generation too, who have all those disease processes from excessive amounts of insulin. Now I think this is where I think Dr. Seyfried's work and my work start to overlap. All right, so we got these problems. I'm sitting in front of a clinic without a team to say, how do I get this to undo? I need the insulin to go down, and I know as soon as it goes down from yesterday, from what it just was, they start to make ketones. Like, I don't have to get it to be perfect for them to get in a ketogenic state, but I do have to get it to be better. And as long as ketones are being produced, I'm now burning fat. I'm now emptying fat from that liver. And this is how we do begin to see that that storage bag of fuel called your liver. It needs to reverse. But during that, you got to keep ketones in circulation. Now, right before I started this lecture, I pulled out these old slides that I made after I studied Dr. Seyfried's lectures. This is a muscle cell. No, it's not exactly what they look like, but I think you could figure that out if I didn't tell you. And those are little bitty mitochondria that really I'm going to blow up because, well, you can see what they are in there. Here is a beautiful mitochondria, the kind that are healthy. They have lots of little waves or cristae in them, and you have glucose that is burned through there. And the glucose goes to pyruvate, and these tiny little amounts of lactate and succinic acid are made, but they are not using the full Krebs cycle. They're extras. They are almost waste products, like Dr. Seyfried just said. What usually happens in this mitochondria is a huge flow of energy. Please don't die. Oh, a huge flow of energy through the mitochondria where it makes a lot of ATP from that fuel in the most efficient way. When you look at the mitochondria burning fat, it will take that fatty acid, turn it into acetyl-CoA through the Krebs cycle, and again, an enormous amount of energy comes out of a string of fat to fuel those cells. And this is what healthy cells do. This is what my mom had a few cells doing in her body the day I was sitting on the floor in Mitchell, South Dakota, reading How Do I Implement This? As you watch, I bet you I didn't need to do that one again. Well, you get to see it twice. This is what respiration was. This is when there's oxygen present is when these things work even better. And respiration, turning that through the mitochondria, is, again, how you make an enormous amount of energy from strings of fat in those cells that are healthy. What damaged cells look like, especially the damaged mitochondria, they're smaller. They are less inflated. They also have holes, if you would, or breaks in how their energy flows. So as we look at the glucose flowing through a mitochondria, these are very old slides, so there's a few mistakes, just look past them. The glucose, lactic acid is 20% of the energy that is coming out of that cell, turning it into a place where it does not use oxygen. These cells don't like oxygen. And during that time, they make quite a bit of their glucose energy turns into that succinic acid or lactic acid. They don't spend energy going through the Krebs cycle. In fact, it leaks out. Those electrons are that those rogue protons that are in the wrong spot. They are aging the cells. They are damaging the DNA. And that's what cancer cells thrive on. Those free radicals will destroy other cells, but they promote the environment where cancer loves to live. And the higher those electrons are burned, the more toxic that environment becomes, but the better it is for that cancer cell. The harder it is to actually take in some of the chemotherapy that we're giving them. They're using all the wrong rules. They're breaking the rules. Our good cells will take in the chemotherapy better than the cancer cells will. Again, this is just another way to say what Dr. Seyfried had just said, which is when the fuel goes in through the glucose fuel, where cancer cells like this, yes, you have the leaking of those electrons. I think the next one is, hang tight. This is 2017 I made these slides. I'm like, they're right here. Yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. Yeah, so electron transport chain, oxidative phosphorylation, very little energy is coming all the way out of those cells. They are getting stuck, and you get instead a bunch of lactic acid and that succinic acid. That's how those cancer cells survive. What we are outsmarting when there's ketones in production is the fuel. And it is a constant drive when you're in my clinic to say, if you want the improvement in those mitochondria, we must first lower the amount of insulin you're producing. We don't check that in a lab. We check that with your finger prick. Because instead of a GKI, we use dirty math. We do not convert those units like every scientist should. My mom was too sick. She couldn't do that. So I said, Mom, just take the big number and divide it by the little number, and we'll find a chart for you to follow. I didn't call it the Dr. Boz ratio, but it got that name over the next few years, and it stuck. Dirty math is the GKI. It's exactly what Dr. Seyfried is looking at, and although his teams use that to follow cancer, we use that to follow insulin resistance. So as we look at the production of, as the glucose lowers and the ketones rise, the amount of insulin needed to communicate at the cell level. Now that's different than saying, what's the amount of insulin in your blood? Because insulin resistance is morphed over time, and that's what makes it so difficult when people say, but doc, my fasting insulin is blank. I don't care. What did your cell say about that? And when your cell has the ability to hear it, then it's going to behave one way. When it takes a lot more of it, it's going to behave a different way. And that's essentially what we use in the clinical practice for this. So, Dr. Boz ratios are something that if you followed my channel at all, when we look at autophagy, again, we are trying to predict autophagy by lowering your Dr. Boz ratio. It is an approximation of how much insulin it's taking to deliver that energy into the mitochondria. And we use that over time. Because if you've ever stalled on the keto or the carnivore diet, it's because your cells got healthier. That's a good thing. But if you want to reverse the problem, we still have work to do. When the Dr. Boz ratio is over 200, those blood sugars are higher and the ketones are lower. As the glucose improves, the ketones rise. And if you've ever done this long term, you'll know that reaching a Dr. Boz ratio one day is not the same as a consistent production of a lower GKI or a lower Dr. Boz ratio. When we're taking care of patients with advanced pathology, seizures, cancers, we use whatever we can to get that GKI as good as possible, which means they're taking MCT oil, they're doing anything to increase the production of ketones. But we know that because in an ideal setting, you have time to let me change those broken mitochondria into healthy mitochondria. But that doesn't happen when you're also fighting chemotherapy. You're on a timeline. You now have 15 doctors telling you what to do, and I don't live near you. My care was disruptive. It didn't help them. It stressed them out, and it made everybody angry. What we have learned is, okay, we can teach you and we can teach your family how to advance your ketogenic diet. So when people come to me, I start out on a continuum. You don't have to go through all 12 steps of a continuum to be healthy, but most people come in eating 3 times a day-ish and their blood sugars shoot up way too high. As we say, go on a carnivore diet, go on a ketogenic diet, we lower their blood sugars, boom, and they do okay. After some time, during that same time, because they lowered their insulin production, ketones rose. And everybody's in a great place. And then about 6 weeks later, they're like, but doc, I cannot make any more ketones. What happened? And this is because you got a little healthier, and your body is not in the business of wasting energy. It will only push you into a nutritional ketosis if you're on the edge and you're stressing it, hormesis, you're pushing the edge. And if you've ever done that, it's hard. So the next thing we did was here's Dr. Boz ratio of 300. You're not going to be fixing cancer problems with a Dr. Boz ratio of 300. Even at night, when you fasted a few hours, it's still really high. That's not going to improve our problem. So then we say, all right, cut out a meal. Let's go to 2 meals a day. And again, the ketones will rise a little bit, but then they sink again. And their body gets used to that, and that's called a stall. We see this a lot. So then we introduce you to something called an eating window and say, all right, from the first bite to the last bite, I need this to be a less time, Again, we're pushing you to stress your metabolism. Find a different way to make the fuel. So in most people, they will give up the morning meal, and then they will eat way too late at night. Your body doesn't like that, especially if you've been around the sun too many times. That eating window should be closer to sunrise than sunset. And that's because you automatically produce glucose and produce insulin in the morning. That's from your body will sense the rise of the sun, and you're going to do that because you're alive. So when I look at a Dr. Boz ratio with an improved eating window, we now have times during the day, not all times, but times during the day where we're getting into the double digits, into a place where you are going to have some impact. But that's when we do see ketones in our production, and we know that you're never going to get there without a community. You're never going to get there in one day. And that empty liver is what you need if you're trying to fight or prevent cancer. So, are you still insulin resistant? Here are some patients that I've followed over the years, and I'm going to show you what they were about a year ago, which was not at the beginning of their story. Actually, I do have what I guess was their beginning of their story. This is an insulin. This is the reversed insulin resistance. This is what everybody says in the literature your blood sugars should be, and that's what your insulin should be. That's about what the ketones look like in those patients. Let me show you what impaired glucose tolerance. This patient is a mess. He is 64 years old. He has had 2 heart attacks. He has had a stroke. He comes to me, and everybody in his family hasn't lived as long as him because of the heart disease. I think his calcium score, or CAC score, is in the 1500s. And he was never going to be found by his doctor. Look at that fasting glucose. It's in the 90s. He goes to the VA, and they say he's just fine. I'm like, he's just fine. He's had 2 heart attacks and a stroke. And his A1C is, 5.2. So his blood sugar is controlled, according to everybody. But he makes way too much insulin. So he goes on the ketogenic diet and gets those 20 total carbs down lower. And his blood sugar is better, but you have to really compare to see that. What's interesting is his ketones in the morning. He makes really good ketones. Again, boys do better than girls. And that ketone production stays pretty close to 1.2 until he eats, and then it will sink. God forbid he eats a donut. It's down for days, and he has tested that. So he comes to me now, and we've done a couple of other things. Again, morning blood sugars are great in this man, but his ability to keep those ketones high has been dramatically improved over the last couple of, probably the last 6 months. So look at the ketones there. Even during an eating session, they say high. But look how little his blood sugar went up. Last, impaired fasting glucose. This is another woman who had a hell of a time. She was diagnosed with prediabetes. Her A1C 6.6, 6.8. Again, a lot of insulin it was taking to control it. She dropped those carbs to total of 20 or less, and her glucose went better. Her ketones were up. But she's a girl, so dang, those ketones are much harder for them to keep up. And they went down. Every time she'd eat, they went down. She was eating 1 meal a day. They were still very low. And she had other metabolic problems. She had autoimmune disorders that she couldn't get to go away. But now, look at that blood sugar at 80. Look at her ketones when she fasts. Again, fasting just means that she hasn't eaten since yesterday. When you hear me talk about that, usually it means 36 hours is what I use for fasting. And although her ketones do go down during her meal, it is impressive how quickly they will return back to that 1.8 to 2.0 level. So, people who reverse their insulin resistance, first of all, they measure. I know it's difficult, but you must be looking at your glucose and your ketones. Glucose is one thing. It's the production of how much fuel is coming out of that liver at any given time, and how much you've stored in it over the years is a big part of that factor. Ketone production, that's the truth teller. How well can you take a fatty acid and turn it into fuel? And when it is 0, it's a signal to you. You must be stressing things. And that's where we've learned that what I have come to, actually, after several of the referrals from Dr. Seafried were across the country, and I couldn't help them. They needed to do hard things, but if you've ever seen mankind do hard things, you don't do it alone. You do not do it alone. So when I moved my practice from South Dakota to the world of Florida, it was during the pandemic, and they shut down the whole East Coast, which included getting the paperwork from the federal government to start my clinic again. And it's one of those moments where God pushed me to do something that I might have not been brave enough to do, and that is, what if I taught 200 people at once how to do an advanced ketogenic diet like I did my mother? And at the end of that 3 weeks, we were checking, they prick their fingers, they do these hard things, they do sardines for 72 hours as a group, and everybody's numbers are on the board so that the community you're in also sees you and your data. That positive peer pressure is how we change behavior. They can see, yes, your body can make ketones. This is what hormesis looks like. They do up to a 72-hour fast during that time, and they leave the class with the knowledge of what it looks like to do the kind of protocols that it took to make my mom better. That class I do only twice a year. It is a very advanced level in doing a ketogenic diet, but people leave there with their stalls undone, and the support group that you're in, this group of 10 students, you own that. It is sustainable. Whenever I'm designing anything, I think, could my mom understand it, and could she afford it? So the class is intense. I do it twice a year, and if you're stalled or you're wondering, how do I take this to the next level? Or if you write into my clinic and say, I have cancer, or my loved one has cancer, can you see me? The answer will be no, but you, or more importantly, somebody in your family that loves you, should join our class, because that's what we've done for this will be our 7th class in the fall, and those students go out into their families, their friends, their businesses, and say, this is what a ketogenic diet, a nutritional ketogenic diet looks like, and this is how we reverse insulin resistance. Oh, yes. What did I say? Oh, anyway, thank you.